She's not mine, Julia. Do the DNA test. Nate's words sliced through the air, shattering what should have been the happiest moment of my life. I lay there, exhausted and sweaty, our newborn daughter cradled in my arms. The delivery room fell silent, save for the steady beep of monitors. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. What did you say? Nate's face was a mask of cold fury. You heard me. I want a paternity test. Now. My mother-in-law, Laura, gasped. Nate, how could you? This is hardly the time or place. But Nate wasn't listening. His eyes bored into mine, accusing and relentless. How long have you been lying to me, Julia? Who's the real father? The room spun. I clutched our daughter closer, as if to shield her from the venom in her father's voice. Nate, please, I whispered. You're not thinking straight. This is our baby. Prove it, he spat. Dr. Parker stepped forward, his kind face creased with concern. Mr. Mayfield, I must insist you leave the room. Your wife needs rest, and this stress isn't good for the baby. Nate's father, Hank, put a hand on his son's shoulder. Come on, son. Let's get some air. But Nate shrugged him off. I'm not going anywhere until I get answers. He turned to Dr. Parker. How soon can we do the test? I couldn't believe this was happening. Just hours ago, Nate had held my hand, whispering words of encouragement as I pushed through the pain. Now he looked at me like I was a stranger. Worse, an enemy. Nate, I pleaded, tears welling in my eyes. Why are you doing this? You know I've never been with anyone else. He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Do I? I'm not so sure anymore, Julia. The test will tell us the truth. As a nurse ushered Nate out, followed by his stunned parents, I looked down at our daughter. Her tiny face was scrunched up, oblivious to the storm raging around her. I traced her cheek with a trembling finger, overwhelmed by love and fear in equal measure. Dr. Parker squeezed my shoulder. Try to rest, Julia. We'll sort this out. But as I cradled my baby, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. The life I thought I had, the happy marriage, the loving family was crumbling around me. And I had no idea why. As I sat in the rocking chair, nursing my week-old daughter, I couldn't help but drift back to happier times. The day Nate proposed flashed through my mind. A perfect summer evening in the park, fireflies dancing around us as he got down on one knee. I'd never seen him so nervous, so vulnerable. It was the Nate I fell in love with, worlds away from the cold, accusing stranger in the delivery room. A knock at the door jolted me from my reverie. Julia? It's Laura. Can I come in? I adjusted my shirt and called out, Come in! My mother-in-law entered, her face a mask of concern. How are you holding up, dear? As well as can be expected, I replied, forcing a smile. Laura perched on the edge of the bed, wringing her hands. I just don't understand what's gotten into Nate. This isn't like him at all. I bit back a bitter laugh. It wasn't like the Nate we knew, true, but it was very much like the Nate of the past few months, distant, suspicious, cruel. Have you heard from him? I asked, dreading the answer. Laura shook her head. He's not returning our calls. Hank's beside himself with worry. A wave of anger washed over me. Here I was, caring for our newborn alone, while Nate was off sulking God knows where. Julia, Laura said hesitantly, I hate to ask this, but is there any chance Nate could be right? About the baby? Question hit me like a slap. How can you even ask that? I snapped, clutching my daughter closer. Laura flinched. I'm sorry, we're all so confused. This isn't the son we raised. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Ryan, just heard from Nate. He wants to meet. Says he has proof. Call me ASAP. My heart raced. Proof? Of what? I need to make a call, I told Laura, my voice shaking. Could you take the baby for a moment? As Laura cooed over her granddaughter, I stepped into the hallway, dialing Ryan's number with trembling fingers. What kind of proof could Nate possibly have? And why did the thought fill me with such dread? The weeks following my daughter's birth were a blur of sleepless nights and tense days. Nate had moved out, claiming he needed space to think. His absence was both a relief and a torment. I missed the man I thought I'd married, but I couldn't reconcile that image with his recent behavior. One particularly rough morning, as I struggled to soothe my colicky baby, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Ryan and Angelina, arms laden with groceries and supplies. "Cavalry's here," Ryan announced with a grin. Angelina immediately took the baby, cooing softly. "Go take a shower, Julia. We've got this." Grateful tears pricked my eyes as I nodded. Later, as we sat around the kitchen table, Ryan's expression turned serious. "Jules, we need to talk about Nate." My stomach clenched. "What about him?" "I've been doing some digging," Ryan said, exchanging a glance with Angelina. "There's something you need to know." Before he could continue, my phone buzzed. A text from Nate: "We need to talk. Meet me at the park in an hour. Bring the baby." I showed Ryan the message, my hand shaking. His jaw tightened. "You're not going alone." "Ryan," Angelina warned, "maybe we should let Julia handle this." I shook my head. "No, I want you there. Both of you." An hour later, we approached the park bench where Nate sat, his posture rigid. His eyes narrowed when he saw Ryan and Angelina. "I said come alone," he snapped. "They're my support, Nate," I replied, steeling myself. "Now, what's this about?" Nate's gaze flickered to the baby carrier. "I want another DNA test. A private one." "Are you kidding me?" Ryan exploded. "Haven't you put her through enough?" Nate stood, looming over us. "Stay out of this. It's between me and my wife." "Ex-wife, if you keep this up," I retorted, surprising myself with my boldness. Nate's face darkened. "Fine. You want to play it that way? I have proof, Julia. Proof that you've been lying." He pulled out his phone, showing me a series of text messages. My blood ran cold as I read them, intimate exchanges between me and an unknown number, discussing meetups and declarations of love. "That's not me," I whispered, horrified. "Nate, I swear, I've never seen these before." But Nate's eyes were cold, unyielding. "Save it, Julia. I know the truth now." As he stormed off, leaving us stunned in his wake, I turned to Ryan and Angelina. "You have to believe me. Those messages are fake." Ryan's expression was grim. "I believe you, Jules. And I think I know what's really going on here. But you're not going to like it." The morning sickness hit me like a freight train. I barely made it to the bathroom, retching violently as my body rebelled against me. As I slumped against the cool tile, tears streaming down my face, I heard Nate's footsteps in the hallway. "Julia?" His voice was cold, devoid of concern. "I'm heading out. Don't forget to clean the kitchen." I wanted to scream, to tell him I could barely stand, let alone clean. But the words caught in my throat as another wave of nausea hit me. Hours later, I managed to drag myself to the couch. My phone buzzed, a text from Angelina, checking in. "How are you holding up?" Before I could reply, Nate burst through the front door, his face contorted with rage. "Who the hell is Michael?" he demanded, waving his phone in my face. I blinked, confused. "What?" "I don't know any Michael." "Don't lie to me," Nate shouted. "I saw the text, Julia. Can't wait to see you again, babe. Last night was amazing. How long have you been cheating on me?" My head spun. "Nate, I swear, I've never sent those messages. I don't know what you're talking about."
But Nate wasn't listening. He paced the room, ranting about betrayal and lies. As his voice rose, so did my anger and frustration. "Enough!" I shouted, surprising us both. "I've had it with your accusations and your coldness. I'm pregnant with your child, Nate. I'm sick, I'm exhausted, and instead of supporting me, you're throwing wild accusations." Nate's eyes narrowed. My child? Are you sure about that, Julia? The words hit me like a slap. How dare you, I whispered, my voice shaking. After everything we've been through, how can you even think that? Because I don't know who you are anymore. Nate exploded. The Julia I married wouldn't lie to me, wouldn't sneak around behind my back. And the Nate I married wouldn't treat me like this. I shot back, finding strength I didn't know I had. I want you out, Nate. Now. His face hardened. Fine. But don't think this is over. I want a paternity test when that baby's born. And I'll be damned if I let you take me for everything in the divorce. As the door slammed behind him, I collapsed onto the couch, sobs racking my body. Through my tears, I picked up my phone and dialed Ryan's number. Ryan. I choked out. I need help. I think my marriage is over. The contractions hit me like a freight train, each wave more intense than the last. I gripped the hospital bed rails, gritting my teeth against the pain. You're doing great, Julia, Dr. Parker encouraged. Not much longer now. Laura squeezed my hand, her face etched with concern. Where's Nate? He should be here by now. I shook my head, fighting back tears. Nate had barely spoken to me in weeks, and now he was missing the birth of his child. Our child. Another contraction ripped through me, and I cried out. Just then the door burst open. Nate stumbled in, his eyes wild and unfocused. I'm here, he slurred. Let's get this over with. The smell of alcohol hit me, and my heart sank. Nate, are you drunk? He ignored me, turning to Dr. Parker instead. I want that DNA test. Right after the baby's born. Laura gasped. Nate, this is hardly the time. It's the perfect time, Nate snapped. I need to know if this kid is even mine. The pain of his words cut deeper than any contraction. Get out, I whispered. What? Nate's eyes narrowed. I said get out. I shouted, surprising everyone, including myself. I won't have you ruining this moment. Leave, Nate. Now. For a moment, he looked like he might argue. Then, without a word, he turned and stormed out. The next hour was a blur of pain, exhaustion, and finally, indescribable joy as my daughter entered the world. As I held her for the first time, my heart swelled with love. She's perfect, Laura whispered, tears in her eyes. Dr. Parker cleared his throat. Julia, I hate to bring this up now, but about the DNA test. Nate was quite insistent. I looked down at my daughter, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger. In that moment, I made a decision. Do it, I said firmly. Run the test. I have nothing to hide, and I'm done with Nate's accusations. It's time to put this to rest once and for all. Laura squeezed my shoulder. Are you sure? I nodded, a newfound strength coursing through me. I'm sure. It's time for the truth to come out, whatever that truth may be. As Dr. Parker left to arrange the test, I cradled my daughter closer. No matter what happened next, I knew one thing for certain. I would fight with everything I had to protect her and give her the life she deserved, with or without Nate. The tension in the hospital room was palpable as we waited for Dr. Parker to return with the DNA test results. Nate paced like a caged animal, while Laura sat beside me, her hand clasped tightly in mine. My daughter slept peacefully in her bassinet, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. When Dr. Parker finally entered, his face was grave. I have the results, he said, his voice unnaturally calm. Nate snatched the envelope from his hands, tearing it open. As he read, his face contorted with a mix of triumph and rage. I knew it, he shouted, throwing the paper at me. She's not mine. You lying, cheating. That's impossible, I whispered, my world crumbling around me. There must be some mistake. Dr. Parker cleared his throat. Actually, there is a mistake, but not the one you think. He pulled out another envelope. These are the real results. The ones Mr. Mayfield just read were tampered with. The room fell silent. Nate's face drained of color. What are you talking about? I had my suspicions when I saw how eager you were for this test, Nate, Dr. Parker explained. So I ran 2 tests. The real one shows that you are, without a doubt, this child's father. Laura gasped. Nate, what have you done? But Nate wasn't listening. He lunged at Dr. Parker, grabbing his collar. You're lying. You've always favored Julia, just like her father did. That's enough, I shouted, finding strength I didn't know I had. Nate, it's over. Whatever game you've been playing, whatever lies you've been telling, it ends now. As if on cue, Ryan and Angelina burst into the room. Julia, we have proof, Ryan said, holding up a flash drive. Nate's been having an affair. He set this whole thing up to frame you. Nate's face crumpled, the fight draining out of him. You don't understand, he mumbled. I never meant for it to go this far. But I was beyond listening. Months of pain, doubt, and fear crystallized into a single, burning point of rage. Get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Get out of this room, out of this hospital, and out of our lives. We're done, Nate. For good. As Nate stumbled out, followed closely by a shell-shocked Laura, I turned to Dr. Parker, Ryan, and Angelina. Thank you, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I don't know what I would have done without you all. I looked at my daughter, still sleeping peacefully. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I had the strength to face them, for her and for myself. The hospital room felt like a courtroom as Ryan and Angelina laid out their evidence. My heart raced, torn between vindication and horror at the depths of Nate's betrayal. We've been investigating Nate for weeks, Ryan explained, his voice tight with anger. We knew something wasn't right. Angelina pulled out her tablet, showing a series of incriminating photos. This is Evelyn, she said, pointing to a striking blonde woman. She's the daughter of Gregory Hartley, the real estate tycoon. Nate's been having an affair with her for months. I felt the blood drain from my face. But why? Why go through all this? Ryan's expression darkened. Money. Evelyn's pregnant, and Nate wanted out of your marriage without losing his stake in the family business. He thought if he could prove you were unfaithful, he'd get everything in the divorce. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The distant behavior, the accusations, the tampered DNA test. It had all been part of Nate's twisted plan. Just then, Nate burst back into the room, his face contorted with rage. You had no right to dig into my personal life, he shouted at Ryan and Angelina. I found my voice, anger giving me strength. And you had no right to destroy our marriage, to try to take my daughter away from me. Nate's eyes darted around the room, realizing he was cornered. You don't understand, he pleaded. Evelyn and I were in love. This was the only way. The only way? I interrupted, my voice shaking. The only way was to gaslight me, to make me think I was going crazy, to try to steal our child. Laura, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. Nate, how could you? Your father and I raised you better than this. Nate's facade crumbled. I'm sorry, he whispered. I never meant for it to go this far. But his words rang hollow. I looked at my daughter, sleeping peacefully through the chaos, and made a decision. I want a divorce, I said, my voice steady. And I want full custody. You'll never hurt us again, Nate. As security escorted Nate out, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in months, I could see a future. One where my daughter and I were free from Nate's lies and manipulation. Ryan squeezed my hand. You did it, Julia. It's over. But as I looked at my newborn daughter, I knew it wasn't over. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would have to be stronger than ever before. 6 months after the hospital confrontation, I stood in the courthouse, my heart pounding as the judge delivered her verdict. Full custody granted to Julia Mayfield, she announced, her voice firm and clear. Relief washed over me as I hugged Ryan and Angelina, tears streaming down my face. We'd done it. My daughter was safe, and Nate could never hurt us again. Outside, Laura and Hank waited, their faces etched with a mix of sorrow and support. Julia, Laura began, her voice trembling, we're so sorry for everything. We hope, in time, you'll let us be part of our granddaughter's life. I nodded, not quite ready to forgive, but willing to consider it. We'll see, I said softly. As we walked away, Dr. Parker approached, a warm smile on his face. Your father would be so proud of you, Julia, he said, squeezing my shoulder. You've shown incredible strength. That night, as I rocked my daughter to sleep, I reflected on the whirlwind of the past year. The pain, the betrayal, the fear, it had all led to this moment of peace. A knock at the door revealed Ryan and Angelina, bearing takeout and wide grins. "We thought you could use a celebration dinner," Angelina said, hugging me tight. As we sat around my small dining table, laughing and sharing stories, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. These people, my true family, had stood by me through the darkest times, never wavering in their support. "I don't know how I'll ever thank you both," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Ryan shook his head. "You don't have to thank us, Jules. This is what family does." Looking at my daughter, peacefully asleep in her bassinet, I realized that while my life hadn't turned out as I'd planned, it had led me to something even more precious, a deeper understanding of love, loyalty, and my own strength. As the evening wound down, I stood by the window, gazing at the city lights. The future stretched before me, no longer shadowed by Nate's lies and manipulation. It wouldn't be easy, raising a child on my own, but I knew I wasn't truly alone. I had my daughter, my unwavering support system, and a newfound confidence in myself. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them head-on. The nightmare was over. It was time to embrace the dawn of a new day, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of a brighter future for my daughter and me.